Coming up on Locked On Dodgers, what will the Dodgers infield look like this year? Andrew Friedman was on the radio and had some thoughts, and we had some thoughts on his thoughts. So all that and a lot more on today's Locked On Dodgers.
You are Locked On Dodgers, your daily Los Angeles Dodgers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, this is Locked On Dodgers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen every weekday morning. Remember, this show is free and available on all podcast platforms and on YouTube simply by searching for Locked On Dodgers. Or even better, go and subscribe wherever you're watching and listening right now, and then you will never miss a day because asterisk, we're not going to. If this is your first time with us, I am Jeff Snider. My co-host is Vince Samperio. We're doing a split episode today, so it'll be me for the first half and Vince for the second half. Vince and I are both lifelong Dodger fans just like you. We've also both spent time covering the Dodgers in the press box and the locker room. So we're not quite insiders, but we bring you the smart fans perspective on our boys in blue every weekday morning. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. And I put that little asterisk at the beginning when I said we're never going to miss a day because, as you might have noticed, we kind of missed on Friday. Vince and I recorded our regular episode Thursday night like we always do. And this online web system that we use to record ate our recording. It was gone. We thought it was gone forever. And we didn't have time to re-record it. Vince and I both had a lot going on Friday. And so I am really, really sorry that we didn't have an episode for you first thing Friday morning like we have the last 199 weeks before that. That was the end of our 200th week since we went daily on March 25th, 2019. It was the first time we ever missed a day. The good news is, if you didn't notice in your feed, that episode has been restored. They found it and they gave it back to us on Sunday afternoon. So Sunday evening, I uploaded that around a little after 9 o'clock Pacific time. It should have showed up in your feed or on YouTube. And so it's kind of a bonus episode, kind of a make good episode on Fridays. But I am back to claiming we've never missed a day because the episode we recorded for Friday is now available. And we'll just pretend that it was available on Friday, you know? So with that said, let's jump into what we're talking about today. And Andrew Friedman, the Dodgers, I always want to say general manager. He's their president of baseball operations. Their actual general manager is Brandon Gomes, but Andrew Friedman calls the shots, runs the show over there. And he was on the radio this weekend, and he was talking about the Dodgers infield. And he said right now, if he had to guess, obviously Freddie Freeman is at first base, Gavin Lux is at shortstop, and he said he would guess Max Muncy at third base and Miguel Vargas at second base. And that was notable for a couple reasons. Miguel Vargas has been a third baseman throughout his minor league career, but his defense has always been the one question mark for him. Everybody agrees he's going to hit in the big leagues. Question is, can he play enough defense? And but with Justin Turner leaving, obviously it created an opening at third base, although Muncy was basically the Dodgers' primary third baseman last year. He played more third base than Justin Turner did last year. And Muncy he's a solid third baseman. A lot of people, I think I mentioned this the other day, I liked his defense more than a lot of people did at third base. I thought he was perfectly fine. I don't think he's going to win any Gold Gloves, but he was perfectly fine. And the fact is, he used to be a perfectly fine first baseman and then turned himself into the best defensive first baseman in baseball. He used to be a less than perfectly fine defensive second baseman and turned himself into a good defensive second baseman. And so I have no doubt that if he's put in the role of everyday third baseman, that he will turn himself into a solid, at least, third baseman. But it's kind of interesting that they are going with, or that Friedman guesses that they'll be going with Muncy at third and Vargas at second. Vargas is faster than Muncy, has more foot speed. I don't know if that translates directly to range. Simply because, I mean, there's a lot more to infield range than foot speed because you have to get jumps and all that. But to the extent that it is impacted by foot speed, Vargas is going to be in a better situation than Muncy there. And so that part makes sense. The other part, I guess, that makes sense to me, even though I'm surprised that they're not, that they might not give Vargas a chance to earn the third base job. The other part that maybe makes sense to me is second base, especially with the shift band, is a more valuable position than third base as far as if you can get offense. And so basically, because if it's a harder position to play defensively, the offensive bar to play there is lower, which is why, when I was a kid, we had shortstops who couldn't hit a lick, but they kept playing because they could play shortstop. And there were only so many people who could play shortstop. And then, guys started come along then, and there were a few when I was a kid, Cal Ripken and Alan Trammell, and to a lesser extent, Tony Fernandez, guys like that. But then, in the late 90s, you had the boom of Jeter and A-Rod and Nomar and those guys who could hit and play defense. And so that position changed. But second base is a harder position to play than third base, especially with the shift band. And so any offense that they get from Vargas is more valuable with him as a second baseman than as a third baseman, simply because the third base defense is easier to replace. So it doesn't necessarily change. If you're talking about Vargas at second and Muncy at third, or Muncy at second and Vargas at third, doesn't change the actual overall value for the team because it's the same two guys. But for example, Vargas, maybe his rookie of the year chances are better as a second baseman than as a third baseman, simply because his WAR will be higher with the same offense as a second baseman. Not as much higher as if he was a shortstop or a center fielder or a catcher, but still higher than a third baseman. And so it's going to be interesting. I have no idea what to expect from Vargas as a second baseman. And the other thing that was kind of interesting about this was there was no mention of Michael Busch. And Michael Busch is the Dodgers' top second base prospect. He's hit throughout the minors. It seems like the time is now for him to be in the big leagues for some team. Busch did play some left field, and so maybe that's a possibility for him in LA, although Friedman also said he thinks Chris Taylor in left field, which makes sense if Taylor does bounce back offensively. And I think that's kind of the underlying assumption, or the unspoken caveat there, is Taylor's not going to be the starting left fielder if he's not hitting. If he hits as poorly as he did last year, they're going to have to figure something out. But I think what they're expecting is that with the fully healthy offseason, hard work this offseason, none of the nagging injuries he had last year, that they're expecting Chris Taylor to come in and be ready to play left field. And so Michael Busch might be the odd man out. And, in just a minute, I'm going to talk kind of a little bit about Michael Busch and the perception versus reality, and wondering what that might be for him defensively. But yeah, the infield stuff, I don't have any idea, honestly. A lot of people say that Dave Roberts is a puppet for the front office, just does whatever they say. And I don't know if Andrew Friedman, when he says, if I had to guess, if it's a wink, wink, I don't have to guess because I'm the guy in charge, or if he really doesn't know what the plan is and if it's really going to be open in spring training. I think it would make sense for the Dodgers to use every bit of spring training they can to get a feel for what their infield is going to look like, what their outfield is going to look like. But it was interesting to get that insight from Friedman. So like I said, I'm going to come back and I'm going to talk a little bit more about Michael Busch before I turn it over to Vince. So thank you for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen every weekday morning, and please keep it Locked On Dodgers. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. This year, the only app you need at your Super Bowl party is FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. We're really excited about our new sports betting partner for Locked On because they're the #1 sportsbook in America, FanDuel. If you're new to FanDuel, that's even better. They have so many great features that make betting on sports fun and easy. Download FanDuel now so you can bet Super Bowl 57 with a no sweat first bet. You'll get up to $3,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. FanDuel lets you bet on everything from the money line to point spreads to who will score a touchdown. And as you'll recall last week, I told you, take the under on the Eagles 49ers game. It was over-under was set at 46.5. I said, take that under. Guess what? What was it? 38 points? Should have took the under. Should have listened to Jeff, sports betting expert right here. Could have done it at FanDuel, made yourself a little money. The FanDuel Sportsbook app is safe, secure, and super easy to use. Best of all, you can get paid your winnings instantly. So join FanDuel today at fanduel.com/lockedon to claim your no sweat first bet on Super Bowl 57. That's fanduel.com/lockedon. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, I am back. I want to thank you again for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen every weekday morning. When you are done here, for your second listen, check out Locked On MLB Prospects. Host Lindsey Crosby is a prospect encyclopedia, and he's going deep on the MLB stars of tomorrow. It's free and available wherever you get podcasts. And my last topic before I hand it off to Vince, I want to talk about Michael Busch. Michael Busch has hit very well throughout his time in the Dodgers minor league system. He was drafted just a few years ago out of North Carolina. He was actually a first baseman in college, and that's where it gets interesting because the Dodgers drafted him and immediately turned him into a second baseman. They saw something in his athleticism, said this guy could be a second baseman, and just like I was talking about with Vargas, with the positional adjustment, meaning offense is more valuable from a second baseman than from a third baseman, the gap is even bigger between second base and first base. First base is one of the easiest defensive positions to play. Don't tell Jock Peterson I said that. And so any offense you get from second base is a ton more valuable than offense you get from first base. And so that's part of why they moved Busch. They said, well, he can hold down second base. He can hit. Let's move him there. He's more valuable. Now the shift has been banned. And the question becomes, can this former college first baseman hold down second base without the shift? Because it's a different position than it used to be. And I've said before, we don't know what to expect all around from the banning of the shift. There's going to be things we haven't even thought about yet that we were like, oh, wow, that was an unforeseen consequence of banning the shift. Some will be good, some will be bad, who knows? We can't really say for sure how any particular second baseman will handle defensive second base. Because, I mean, teams can still position guys. There's just limits on it. They have to be on the dirt. They have to be two infielders on each side of second base. But you can still, if you have a left-handed pull hitter, you can still have your second baseman shaded towards first base. And so there's still going to be some, the thing I think we're going to see most of maybe is more line drives up the middle being actual hits like they were when I was a kid, instead of, one hop ground outs to the second baseman or shortstop. But even that, the shortstop can play basically right behind second base, an inch to the third base side of second base. At least under the current rules, they've experimented in the minors with the wedge system where you can't, it kind of creates a triangle behind second base. So you can't play right behind the bag. The farther back you are, the farther away from second you have to be, but they're not doing that in the big leagues. So there's still going to be, we don't know all what's going to happen is my point. But I've seen a lot of people, several people pointing out that Michael Busch is a former quarterback. So he's going to have the footwork, the foot speed, all of that to be a successful second baseman. And I'm not saying that's not true. Some people have made that point pretty belligerently and very, very adamantly. Like, what kind of idiot are you to not realize that Michael Busch used to be a quarterback? Of course he can play second base. And I take those comments with more respect than they're intended. And I don't push back too much. But I will point out that quarterback is a football position and second base is a baseball position, and football and baseball are different sports. And there are plenty, I don't even follow football, and I could make you a list right now of at least 30 quarterbacks in my lifetime who would have been terrible second basemen. Dan Marino, one of the best quarterbacks of all time. I promise you, he didn't have the foot speed and the footwork to be a successful major league second baseman. There are plenty of guys like that who were, sit in the pocket and throw the ball. And even guys who had mobility for a quarterback, it's a different kind of mobility. And it's like when you see even Michael Jordan, who played in the minor leagues, he never looked like a baseball player. He looked like a basketball player playing baseball. And he was maybe the best baseball player of all the basketball players. When you see guys, you'll see a video, this guy showed up at Dodger Stadium or whatever stadium and took batting practice with whatever major league team. And you're like, that guy's a professional athlete, because when you take guys out of their element and have them do something different, they don't look athletic. And so I'm not saying that Michael Busch doesn't have the footwork and the foot speed to be a second baseman. I'm not even saying that his time at quarterback won't play into that. I'm saying the fact that he used to be a quarterback doesn't mean he will be able to hold down second base without the shift. And that's where I think it's so easy for people to just assume they know something because they know one thing about somebody. And the fact is, it's just not always the case. And so the Dodgers know more than we do about Michael Busch because he's been playing their organization. They've had coaches watching him and scouts watching him. They know more than we do. And we're all going to find out soon. I think Michael Busch is going to get some chances at second base in spring training, and we'll see. And maybe he'll surprise all of us except the people who won't be surprised, and he will be a great defensive second baseman, and maybe he won't. But right now, at least according to Andrew Friedman, it seems like Michael Busch is maybe the odd man out. So with that, that's all I have to say. I'm going to turn it over to Vince. So be sure to stick around on Locked On Dodgers because Vince will be along in a minute.
Looking for a delicious treat but don't want all the fat and calories? Then you got to try Built Bar. We just got through the holidays, and I know my goal is to eat a little healthier this year. And if you're like me and want to eat healthier but don't want to compromise taste, then we've got something for you. You got to try Built. With Built, healthy is actually tasty. No, for real. These things are pretty good, and they're perfect for you. They're good for you. And if you have a New Year's resolution that you're still running through a month, we got it for you. Built Bar. What makes Built Bar so good? They're 100% covered in 100% real chocolate. That's right, real chocolate. And they come in great flavors: churro, peanut butter brownie, coconut almond. And it tastes like a candy bar with all the great macros, low calories, only 130 calories and 4 grams of sugar with a whopping 17 grams of protein per bar. And now you don't have to wait to get a box because we've been talking about ordering at built.com for a while now. But now you can go to your local Walmart or Sam's Club and get you some Built Bars. Head to the pharmacy section, grab yourself a box of Built Bars, cookies and cream, double chocolate, coconut puffs, whatever you want. 4-bar box, 13-bar box. Go now and get one and thank us later. Yo, Dodger fans. Vince here to close out the episode. And I'm going to talk a little bit about Joe Kelly. Why am I going to talk about Joe Kelly considering he's not on the Dodgers? That's because he was speaking about Dodger fans this last week. He's coming out with the book called A Damn Near Perfect Game, Reclaiming America's Pastime. And he went on Dodger Talk with Dave Assay, and he was talking about his time with the Dodgers. He's played with the Cardinals, Red Sox, Dodgers, and who was he with last year? White Sox. So here's a couple quotes from him. He said, quote, Boston fans, obviously my time there, they loved it. I would kind of say it's a different kind of passion. They see me as a baseball player. In LA, where I was home and became, I guess, a fan favorite, I feel like it was more family connected. It came more from a love aspect, or he's a one of us type of guys. It's crazy. A few days ago, I came back from Mexico, and in Mexico, Dodger fans are like, Joe Kelly? And I'm like, yep. Then he went on and said, quote, the reach throughout, obviously the West Coast, Mexico, being home in California, it's a different kind of love. I think it's more of a friendship type love than me just being a baseball player. The fan base in St. Louis was great and in Boston, but that was more, I like him because he's on the Red Sox. It's definitely different, and ultimately I think Dodgers have the best fan base. They appreciate being true to yourself. That's a special bond that will be in my heart and their hearts forever. And yeah, I mean, this is interesting and good. I mean, I don't know, good take, but a smart take, I guess. Whereas, like, the Red Sox fans are passionate and, they love the Red Sox and they love Boston and, everything else. But it does feel like, they're definitely rooting for who's on the, what's on the front of the jersey, Red Sox. They're not necessarily rooting for individual players, or at least for the last few years, they haven't really been able to fall in love with individual players. Now they can, I believe, comfortably fall in love with Rafael Devers. He's going to be there a while, and obviously, those guys from some of those Red Sox teams that broke the curse and won championships, Big Papi, Manny, all those guys are always going to be loved in Boston. But I think, Dodger fans, and I've been one, maybe not on this podcast, or maybe on this podcast, and maybe on social media before, where people try to claim like, oh yeah, Dodger fans are the best. And yeah, Dodger fans are the best, but there is a large subsection of Dodger fans that aren't necessarily the best. And you can find that with any fan base. But when your fan base, this is the fan base you're closest to, you're obviously going to notice it. And there's not always times I'm like, oh yeah, I'm proud to be a Dodger fan right now. I'm proud to be a fan of the Dodgers, but not necessarily proud to be a Dodger fan. So but yeah, when it comes to it, I think the Dodgers do develop stronger connections with players in turn, even if it's short term, long term. I think if you endear yourself to the crowd, uh, you're pretty much endeared for maybe not, probably for life, unless you go somewhere else and do something against the Dodgers. Now, Joe Kelly was a little bit opposite, broke Kenley Ramirez's rib, was very dominant in the 2018 World Series when the Red Sox beat the Dodgers. So when he came to the Dodgers, it was like, if you can help us out, yeah, we're going to appreciate you, but don't necessarily want you here, I guess, in a certain extent. And, he endeared himself. He had a little bit of a weird first year, but then he had that moment with Carlos Correa. And that definitely endeared him to fans. Ever since then, he was going to be beloved, even though, 2019, like I said, weird year, and then he gave up the grand slam to Howie Kendrick and then ODS in Game 5, and you're not necessarily and the fact that they paid more money than normal to him for the reliever was like, And then 2020, yeah, you had the Carlos Correa incident, and at the end of it, he came out and closed the game in the playoffs, and end of it, World Series champ, and then we found out he was kind of hurt the whole year, which was interesting, and then 2021 had a pretty solid year. And then had the mariachi outfit and everything else. So he did things to endear himself to the crowd and to the fans, and their fans are going to show that love. And it's not always like on field things. It's all, off field or moments or things like that, and I think kind of the flip side of that, and, Kenley Jansen had a much more dominant career as a Dodger, obviously, than Joe Kelly. But Kenley Jansen, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if this is, me personally, just kind of what I see or what I saw. But the fans turned on him probably quicker than fans should turn on someone with the resume that he had and what he'd done for the Dodgers. But I don't know if he ever really endeared himself to Dodger fans. Now, I remember as a fan of, baseball and the Dodgers, the 2016 NLDS when he came in and threw off 40, 50 pitches and got the Dodgers through those last few innings in Game 5 and then handed it off to Kershaw. That's something you can appreciate. But I think with Kenley Jansen, when you think of Kenley Jansen, you think of only on-field failures. You don't really think of too much else. And yeah, there was sympathy or empathy, depending, when he had the heart issues and everything else. And, I think Jansen's family was, pretty well liked in terms of, I know his wife had a pretty popular social media as well. But, when you think of Joe Kelly, you think of, unless you're maybe a little bit of a masochist, you think of the Carlos Correa incident. And that's the first thing that comes to your mind. And, 2019 NLDS Game 5 maybe doesn't come to your mind right away. When you think of Kenley Jansen, you probably think of multiple things or multiple blown saves, and you don't necessarily remember the positive. And I don't know why, some people just have different, appeals. And obviously, yeah, the Carlos Correa incident played a huge part for Joe Kelly. But I do think Dodger fans, if they like you, they like you. And if, they're indifferent and you start struggling, then they're not going to like you as much. And, Cody Bellinger is another good example. He very bad the last two and a half seasons, to the point where, if you're going to, based on fans that booed Kenley Jansen, that would have, Bellinger's play would have also warranted boos if that's like the threshold. But Bellinger, when you think of Cody Bellinger, what do you think of? You think of MVP and you think of Rookie of the Year, or maybe you think of the robbing, the home run in the 2020 playoffs, or you think of the big home run in the 2020, in Game 7 of the NLCS, or you think of the walk-off hit in against the Brewers the year before. And there's a lot of different things you think of before you get to, oh yeah, he wasn't that great the last 2 years. And it is interesting because, like I said, he was a below average player the last 2 years. Kenley Jansen was never necessarily a below average reliever. He was just below his highest standard. And, I think, Kike Hernandez, yeah. What do you remember for Kike Hernandez? You remember, banana outfit. You remember, the funny, when the drone came out, maybe on TV. You remember some of the other antics. And then you remember clutch home runs. You remember his 3 home runs to send the Dodgers to the World Series in 2017. You remember, his big home run to tie the game in Game 7 of the 2020 NLCS. So I think the moments and not necessarily always on field, but moments on field, moments off field, or personality really endears you to Dodger fans. Jock Peterson, he's actually been a little bit better the last couple of years than he was necessarily as a Dodger the whole time. But you remember the big moments. You remember all the home runs and the monstrous home runs and the celebrations and all that kind of stuff. So all in all, this is to say, like, Joe Kelly's right. I think Dodger fans do find other things. Red Sox fans are gonna like you if you're on the Red Sox for the most part. And if you're playing well for the Red Sox, then they're gonna like you even more. If you're not playing well for the Red Sox, they're not gonna like you. And that's certainly true to a certain extent for every fan base. But I do think the Dodgers, there's ways to endear yourself to a fan base other than just on-field play. Kike Hernandez probably got way more brand or sponsorship or whatever opportunities than maybe, a player of his caliber would have. I mean, at best, he was a starter, above average starter, and realistically for the Dodgers, he was more of a utility player, and that's not a bad thing. Chris Taylor, more of a utility player, but he, fits his role. And if, he is more on the quiet side, you do remember big moments with him, and you don't necessarily remember that he struck out, 30 some percent of the time last year. You remember, big home runs, a big home run in the 2017 World Series. You remember, big moments for him. You remember the walk-off home run against the Cardinals in the wild card game. So I think with the big moments and the thing like that, the Dodger fans are quicker to fall in love with you and kind of forget. Whereas if you don't necessarily have those moments, or if they're overshadowed by kind of something else, then yeah, they're not necessarily going to be in love with you. Kenley Jansen should have got the send-off and love that Justin Turner got this offseason, but just because of the nature of what it was, he didn't. And obviously Justin Turner has a lot. He has, the foundation and, giving out food to families during the pandemic and all the big moments, the walk-off home runs, the big key plays, all that kind of stuff. He had all that, and he became, certified Dodger legend. Kenley Jansen's going to be a fringe Hall of Fame candidate, and would likely was going to go in as a Dodger unless he has some insane end to his career where he stays with one team and is, thoroughly dominant. But he doesn't get that love as Dodger fans. And it's because we never had that, endeared himself, I guess. It was just kind of, and that's why it's like with him and Joe Kelly, it's kind of a good conversation, because you could say, oh, well, Jensen's a closer. That's a tough job. You only remember the bad. You never remember the good. But we don't remember a lot of Joe Kelly's bad. We don't remember a lot of these other guys bad. We mostly remember the good or the standout moments. Now, yeah, it's the Carlos Correa moment is a big difference than, pretty much anything Jansen could have done. But that's just the way it goes. But yeah, Dodger fans are the best fans. I would agree with that as a whole. But I would, like I said earlier, I am always proud to be a fan of the Dodgers. I'm not always proud to be a Dodger fan, but for the most part, I'm pretty proud to be a Dodger fan too. So that's going to do it for today's episode. Thank you all for listening. Thank you for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen of the day every day. Check out Locked On MLB Prospects for your second listen of the day. Host Lindsey Crosby is going deep on the MLB stars of tomorrow. You can find that wherever you find podcasts, which is also how you can find us, and on YouTube if you search for Locked On Dodgers. which is also how you can find us on social media, Twitter and Instagram. You can find Jeff on Twitter at Snydog. I'm at Vince Samperio. DMs are open on all those accounts if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, or you can always just send us a tweet and tag us in there. And if you have any questions or comments or concerns, you can also send us an email, lockedondodgers@gmail.com, or send us a text or leave us a voicemail at 323-863-5625. We're here every weekday morning, and we hope you'll be with us. When you get in your car, if you're at home, text my device, play podcast Locked On Dodgers. And remember, you don't have to agree, you just have to listen. Have a good one.